March the 2nd, 1989. We have Irene James and Alameda Brooks. They're sisters. They were Picklesimers. They have a brother Lyman and Turley. Their father was
Edward Picklesimer.
And their mother?
Cora Picklesimer.
Just tell me about your parents, where they lived, where you grew up, and the things that interested you and you remember from your childhood.
My mama grew up on Buck Creek, and Dad down on Clear Creek, isn't that right?
That's right, and she came there to teach school.
And Dad went to school to her.
And Mr. Mac Wilson told them now, says there won't be any courting in school. She hadn't thought about dating Dad then.
How old was he?
He was the committeeman,
Yeah.
Mr. Mac Wilson was. So he told them that there wouldn't be any courting. You know, they went to school back then till right there in a one-teacher school till they'd be 20 or 21.
But they didn't go but about 3 months.
Of the year?
Yeah.
That's all.
That's all.
So anyway, she taught the school, and before it was over with, they were in love, and they got married.
And how old were they?
Now, I don't know how old they were when they got married. I believe
Mama was
about 30.
30.
Where did
Where'd
your mother stay? Did she come from Buck Creek all the way to Clear Creek to teach every day, or did she stay with somebody?
I don't remember who she stayed with.
I guess she boarded with Grandma Pickle.
Probably
I
did.
never had thought about that.
I never had either. Mama always kept the school teachers from then on. And then I went to school to Mama. Dad went to school to her, and then I did. And Lyman, but it seemed like
I wasn't old enough. I stayed at
home.
home with Dad. I know I got lost in the corn patch one time.
You did?
And I just scared me nearly to death. I thought I never would find him in that field of corn, but I did.
How old were you?
Well, I wasn't old enough to go to school. I wasn't 6.
Mama gave me a whipping. The only whipping I ever got in school, she gave it to.
Was you a wicked little young'un? Was you a wicked little young'un?
No.
What did you get a whipping for?
Whip you?
What did you get a whipping for?
Lady McCall Cass told, she didn't.
Tell the truth.
Yeah, you know how they were about us. They didn't like us because we believed in school and bigger
Was that the
things
first
than they
school that
did.
was in the area?
And she told, what she told, there wasn't a word of it. So,
I
Mama
don't
said
know
that,
who taught before Mama. Mr. John Arnold taught later, and he stayed at our house when he was a teaching down there.
Mama said that was one whipping she gave that she didn't want to, and she made it as light as she could. For she knew me better than that.
Tell me about these
wasn't
here
lying.
sheep and geese and things y'all used to ride.
Well, we had a great long stable Dad did up on the hill that held about 20 sheep. We had about 20. And we'd put them up at night, and then we fed them, and we'd go up there and get in the pen with them. And we'd jump on, each one of us would get on as a sheep, and they'd just go bobbing right through the whole bunch, and tickle us to death. And when we'd fall off, we'd just hit another sheep, you know, and it was so soft it didn't hurt us. And one day we rode them till right at 12 o'clock. They was hunting for us for dinner and couldn't find it.
What did you keep sheep for? Was it for the wool or for the
wool.
meat or what?
For the wool, and then
Then your mother spun that into...
Dad would butcher one every once in a while and bring it to town.
She'd card it and spin it, and then she'd make her
Make
stockings
rolls
and
out of it, and then
socks. I have 2 quilts now that's padded with that wool.
and Turney has a
That I wouldn't take anything to those
spinning
quilts.
wheel. He has a
Got Mama's hands on it. hadn't
spinning wheel.
Yeah, that's right. But then sometimes, something else about the sheep, I won't tell that.
Turney,
If one of them got away from its mother, you know that mother never would claim them again. And you'd have to take them and feed them. Well, we didn't have such a thing as a bottle and a nipple back then. We had to get out and get us a quill, you know, a weed that we could run and get the pith out of it and put it in the bottle. And then we'd wrap a cloth around it and we'd get it
and feed the sheep.
You'd suck on that
Little
quill?
we
lamb.
had to get the sucking it, so we'd raise that lamb, and we raised one, and it was a male. Well, when it got big enough, we taught it to fight. We'd hold our hands up like that, and it'd come back up and come at us, you know. And we got it so bad that whenever you went to the crib, we'd feed it corn, you know. If it had just butt, we'd give it some corn. So we had it till you couldn't get in the crib what that sheep had just butted. And it butted my daddy one day, and he was really fed up with that sheep. I don't remember what we finally did
And
with it.
Turney'd get on it, and he'd just hold it. He'd get right on the back end of it, and he'd just run around and around and around. And then there's a little foot log. We'd go to the spring, and he'd learned if he'd run across that little narrow foot log, Turney'd fall off before he'd start across. And that's the way he'd get
Rid of it.
A sheep
Hey.
has a lot of sense.
That's about the only pastime we had. We didn't have any movies to go to or
We had to
anything.
make our movie.
We'd have bean stringings now, and we'd go to the bean stringing. And Aunt Nan Neely, they had a banjo, you know, and we'd string beans a little while, and then we'd
Dance or what?
we'd tell Aunt Nan Neely now. She'd say, whenever you get those beans all done, why, we'll let you dance. So some of them just hid some of the beans, or we'd have been there all night. We'd never had any dancing. And then we'd get Etter and Preston them would pick the banjo, and we'd dance.
It was funny.
Well, I wasn't around then. I won't hear about it.
They was our sister-in-law, Pearl, and me was staying with a lady up here, Miss Warren. And Pearl was going with a boy, a Rogers from South Carolina. And he came to see her, and he was riding a horse. And he tied his horse up to a tree, and they went on to the movie. And me and Bill McCall's mother got on that horse after they got gone. We both got on the horse and went on downtown, and right where you turn across to go, let's see, the Eddard's house.
Uh-huh.
Right above the Eddard's house, we tied our horse up. We didn't know nothing else to do with it till we went on the movie. So we went on over there, and that boy that had the horse, we'd been gone so long till they wanted to know what we was doing, and we told them, and he went over there and to see if I had the horse hitched up right. And we did. So after the movie was over, we went back over there and got our horse.
Hey, Mett, tell them what kind of movie that you had. It was
Yeah,
a silent movie. Now.
The movie
They're
then,
setting in the silent movie.
it didn't talk. We had to read it. It'd come out on a board, and we'd have to read it. And they was good movies, but when we went back and got on that horse, we got scared, and we just had an awful time. It just run as hard as it could run. And Miss Nellie Cleveland was walking the sidewalk right there below the King's Inn. And she knew my voice. She's a good friend of ours. And she went to holler, calling me by my name, and said, "Is that you?" And I says, "Yes." But the horse went so fast, and it took up the Satula Mountain. I geared it till I got it started up mountain, for I knew it couldn't. We was both large, you know. So it went run this all it could do up the Satula Mountain till it had to slow down. But that was a lot of fun to us.
Now, who was on it with you?
Dolly McCall, Bill McCall.
They swapped the horse.
Now, that
Yeah,
made a big load for a horse.
Her
You're mighty
sister-in-law
right,
wouldn't
but
go with this man. She wanted to go with her brother. And they went while they was waiting on them to come out. They went up on the hill up there to that silent movie. And this guy comes in up there, and he wants to know who's got his horse.
We had never seen that boy before, but
They went out the side door, went back and got the horse and tried to get it back up there before he found out about it.
it tried to go down the Walhalla Road with us, but we finally got it turned up the mountain.
Ain't that likes fun? So she was riding that horse, and she was going down through there, and there's a laughing and a giggling and a hollering, you know, and it's a hollering at them. So they decided they'd go up there and stay up there a while on the hill up there to that movie,
Yeah.
watch the movie. You know, they made up little things. They read it, and then everybody say something, you know, as they're going through there.
Yeah, people would holler out in the movie. They'd call them someone that they knew. They'd see it in the movie, and then they'd holler and call it some of us, you know, and that did tickle us to death.
And the guy comes in the door back there, and he asks us, "Well, who's got my horse, and where's it at?" And all that. So they went out the side door, and they came back and got the horse, and they rode it back up the hill, got away from.
And then that horse, I was telling you, when I went to Asheville to go to school, the roads were so bad, I had to get out there different ways. I rode one time on a horse. It was a team of horses, and they had it loaded with lumber. And a cousin of mine was driving it, and I went to Toxyway and stayed all night and caught a little old train the next morning and went on up there. But when I came home for Christmas, we came around, I did, by the Saluda Mountains. Do you know where? Have you ever heard of it?
I've heard of it, but I don't know where it is.
Saluda Mountains and Spartanburg and down in there, and then come to Seneca. And Dad and Uncle John came. They brought a wagon and 3 horses to it to meet me. Not that it took that many to
haul you, kid.
to haul me.
He took
But
apples
he had
and things to take.
apples and cabbage and things, and he brought those along. And we camped there in Walhalla the first night. And the next day we got up to the top of Pine Mountain down here, and Dad took his horses out for camp, and Uncle John. And they stayed all night. And I told Dad, I said, well, I'm going on home. And he says, you won't go home. And I says, I will too. I says, you take that mule, give me that mule, and I'll ride it home. It was a great big mule, and it was getting scared over nothing. It was awful dangerous. But I got on it, and it was as dark as it could be. And I got in home at 12 o'clock that night. And then when Dad come in, and I wanted, of course, Irene, and she was at Cashier's going to school. So he said, well, he just couldn't go after her because you couldn't get anywhere in the mud hard then. I said, well, I'm going to get her. I went down to Press Neely's that lived, our cousin down there, and he had an awfully good horse, and I borrowed it and took one of Dad's, and Turley and me, we went through the way they haul their garbage through the Horse Cove. There wasn't no road then, there's just a little trail. And we went on to Cashier's, and Irene had just got turned out of school, and she was a life in the cutting up, and I spoke to her, and she just looked up and then went on about her business, and I said, well, are you not going to talk to me? And she looked up again, and she said, called me by my name, and so Turley got off of his horse, and she got on it, and they happened to be a young boy there. He was riding a horse in Cashier. So we got on our horses, and he tried to outrun us down through Cashier's, but we outrun him. And then we came on around the way the road is now from Cashier's. We rode on around, and it was dark when we came through town. And
The roads were gravel? No.
no,
Mud.
gravel?
Just
mud.
muddy.
Just
dirt
plain
road.
old mud.
I'll never forget when we went back to school. Mett was going back to Asheville, and I was going back over to Cashier's. And we got over there the other side of about short off on the pass there, wasn't it? Where you go up the white side, you know. And it is so muddy that the ones we were riding with is our cousin. They were going back to their logging job, you know. So they let us ride with them. Well, we mired down in the mud, and they never did get out. And the mail came along, and we went on with the mail, and we left them there in the mud.
You used to ride the mule all the time, didn't you? You said you liked to ride the mule?
Oh, I did.
Go over to Buck Creek to church?
I rode my horse. Well, we went together one time, and we rode our mules from Clare Creek on to Buck Creek. It's about, I guess it's 10 miles over there. We'd ride over there and stay all night at Grandpa and then come back.
Now, who was your grandpa?
Newton Rogers. Then I rode my horse. That was after I'd grown up more. I rode my horse over there by myself. And
we'd walk it from Cashier's to Highlands. I know one time we walked it with
Waylon
Chastain.
Yeah, you're related to him, aren't you?
My husband's uncle.
Yeah.
I was trying to think what he was doing over there. It seemed like they was working over there, but I know we walked in front of them. I can't remember who was with him, but we walked in front. We outwalked him, but we stayed in sight of each other.
When you were growing up, did you have when you were courting? You're going out with your boyfriends? Did you have to have somebody go with you, or a grown up?
No.
We usually went as a group, you know.
Yeah.
2 or 3 or 4.
Lyman would go.
Lyman
He would go with us where he was the best thing to us. He'd just go with us anywhere.
Let's back up
And
a little and tell about what a time we had to go into school. You wonder, well, why did you go here and
why did you go to different
there?
places?
Well, it was just a little one-teacher school down there on Clear Creek, and we wanted to go somewhere where we'd get into a better school. So it was 5 miles from Dad's house to Highlands, and we'd walk that every morning, rain or shine, all the way to that old schoolhouse where the liquor store is now.
And then back home.
And sometimes we did start early. We'd take our lantern with us, wouldn't we? And hide it till we got back. Well, we got tired of that, so Mett and I decided we'd go to Tomasi, to the DAR school. Well, we went down there and stayed about 3 months. We didn't like that. So we
just played mostly.
We finally got out of that. So then when she went on to Asheville Normal, and I went over to...
Is that a boarding school?
Asheville Normal was. My mother went there, too.
Mama went
Mama
there.
used to go to school up here to private school, Mr. Aaron and Mr. Harbison.
Mama.
Then she went on to Asheville Normal, and that's where Mett went.
And then I went there.
And then after you finished your high
my
school, where'd you graduate at?
Well, I just gave up on it, and I went to Tennessee and stayed 4 years. I finished up my high school out there and took some college.
Did you have some folks that lived in Tennessee that you stayed with, or you just
boarded? I went on to Lincoln Memorial. It was a college and a high school. And I stayed 4 years.
And that's where you got your teacher's degree?
Part of the time. No, I finished up over here at Western. I took my high school and 1 year college out there. So I came back then and started teaching. You could go to teaching, you know, back then before you got your 4 years. But I went to Western.
Did you get your teacher's certificate before you were married or after you were married?
After I was married.
And then you taught for how many, 21 years in the Highlands school?
Yeah, I went some down there to summer school. My husband died, so I just, got the kids around wherever I could put them. Mett would keep some of them, and Geraldine would stay with Dad and Mama down there. I'd go to summer school, so I kept on till I finally got it.
Barbara and Tom stayed with me, and then Wilma stayed one summer with me.
You had how many children?
Me?
5.
5. 3 girls and 2 boys.
And their names are?
Tom and Herb, and Barbara, Wilma, and Geraldine.
That's Barbara right there.
She died in 1968 in New York.
And your husband's name was?
Lawton James.
And you married Charlie Brooks?
And
you didn't have any children?
No.
But you had Irene's children, so you had children.
She had everybody else's. She really took care of them. And Charlie Brooks, he wasn't a better man in the world than he was. He was so good to all of them.
Tell me about the coon hunting.
Boy, I hadn't time of coon hunting. I bet I shot at least 50 out.
Yourself?
Yeah. Charlie'd always let me shoot the coon. And
did you have your own dogs?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But we wouldn't. I had dogs that wouldn't took nothing for.
Well, I've never been a coon hunter, so tell me what you do.
Well, one night we went, Rad Picklesimer went with us that night, and a black cat ran across the road in front of us. Well, we'd always heard that you had bad luck if that happened, but we went on and we treed 3 coons up one tree, and there's just a half a pound difference in all 3 of those coons.
Did you get to shoot them all out?
Yeah.
Wow, you wicked old woman. Why did you let him have one?
Rad, he liked to hunt with us, but we always laughed about that because we had such good luck after seeing the black cat. But I tell you, there's no telling how many miles I've walked to coon hunting. I know we went one night, or not one night, but went 3 nights on a straight and coon hunted about all night. Boy, that got me.
You had a country store here. Did you coon hunt all night and then come in and run the store the next
I
day?
sure would. I'd run it. I never failed.
You had a bowling alley.
You had the only bowling alley that's ever been in Highlands.
Yeah.
Well, we really had the fun. We
The piccolo and all.
and we
So why don't we fix another one?
danced myself.
They'd bowl and they'd dance.
Sounds like fun.
But I know we went one night down to Mountain Rest, and Charlie's 2 nieces, Carrie's daughter, and their daddy went with us. And we killed, I believe it was 3 coons that night. But we walked the whole night on them rivers down there, you know. And they were going to Walhalla to school. And the next day they couldn't go to school. They had to stay in the bed. And they'll come up here to see me and they'll name that every time about
You walked their legs
me
off.
walking them to death till they couldn't go to school.
That sounds about like some of mine. I try to figure out ways to get out of school all the time.
We ought to tell him about our playhouse. I thought that, and riding the cows.
Tell us about the playhouse.
We built us a playhouse. I guess it was about 8 feet by 8 feet, and we would put poles, Lyman, he would always help and be the boss or something like that. And we'd pole it around, then we'd hang dog hobble this right thick around it. And then we'd cover it over with dog hobble. It would be completely a little house. And we'd go to Mama's old cows as gentle, and we'd just milk. We wouldn't milk all the milk. We'd just get what we wanted, and then we put it in bottles and we'd churn it. We'd just shake it till we'd churn it, and then we got to riding the cows. They was way down in the field, and the barn and the hill would hide us from Dad and Mama. And we'd ride the cows. That was mean, though, to do that. But they finally caught up with us, but they was a long time of catching us.
Did they never miss the milk and stuff you were getting, or did you not get enough?
No, they didn't.
We didn't take that much.
We didn't. We wouldn't milk that much.
Your grandparents, how did they get here to Highlands area?
Mama was raised in Tennessee Valley. Now that's down close to Franklin, isn't it? Or is
Tennessee Valley?
she was born there, and
It is?
is where
She says it's down next to Franklin.
Franklin.
Was Mama
Yeah.
not born on Clay Creek, on Buck Creek?
I mean Grandma Picklesimer.
Well,
No,
you
she-
ask about her you want to know something about her great-grand?
Yeah, well, that's
We
what I
had
was
3
saying.
Picklesimers to come over together.
To go to your high school.
I don't remember.
Or when you were boarding over in Cassie.
Mett got to staying up here with folks in the Highlands. That's
I
where
stayed
she's
with
doing
Miss
all of her
Warren a
horse
while.
riding and
Is that Miss
everything.
Dawn Warren?
Huh?
Miss Dawn Warren?
Miss Warren.
Miss Dawn Warren? Is
Uh,
that her husband's name?
I don't know what her name.
I just said Miss Warren. I did know her name, though.
Already?
MD was her initial.
Let's go back to the
I
grandparents.
guess it was, though.
Tell me about your grandparents, great-grandparents, or back as far as you can and come up again.
Well,
I
Grandma,
had that all on paper, for I wish I'd have brought it. But anyway, I read it not but a few days ago. There were 3 of them, and one settled over on there next above Cullowhee. What's the name of that river? Tuckasegee. And one went on to around Brevard over there. And then one in Tennessee. Well, our daddy, the best I remember, his granddaddy or daddy came from down here around Tuckasegee.
And what was his name?
Benson Picklesimer was our grandfather.
Grandpa, and what was his daddy's name now?
Was Dave?
I believe it's his
Abraham.
daddy's name.
Yeah.
He was a gun. He our
Made guns.
granddaddy made guns, and they came from Germany, some parts of Germany.
He
I
was
don't-
working on a gun, and they saw a big black bear down in the field, and he run him a bullet. They had to make the bullets too, and they went down there and killed the bear. He did. Before he got his gun good and finished. And Grandma, she was born in Tennessee Valley. But I don't know how she met Grandpa, do you?
No, I don't know about
You mean you wasn't there?
I wasn't there. But anyhow, later on, Grandpa, it was during the war, he was in Tennessee.
the Civil War.
Yeah. He was in Tennessee, and she wanted to go to him, so she took 2 or 3 of his children.
He'd been married before.
He'd been married before his wife was dead. And went, and she had to walk it all the way. She'd talk about Loudon, Tennessee, and Black Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And she'd tell us all about what happened on her way over there, but I can't remember. I know one place they had a man on a stump, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And didn't they have an axe or a gun or one? They was,
They had the gun. They were going to shoot
Kill
him
him.
next day.
and
They had him on a stump?
yeah, guarding him on the stump.
Oh.
And they told Grandma, he says, I'll see you. And he asked where they was going, and she told him. And he said, well, he'd see you in that place. And she thought that was the last thing that had happened. But sure enough, it did happen. When they went to eat their dinner, wasn't it?
Well, that man came walking up to her after she got down
Yeah.
to Loudon or wherever it was.
But he knocked him in the head, the ones that guarding him.
She says, well, how in the world did you get here? And she says, well,
they sat down to eat, and they didn't notice him, and he grabbed up his guard and knocked his guard in the head, and he's right on the river, that Tennessee River.
What had he done?
And he went out and got in the boat
And
got away from him.
he
went
told they
Well,
met
you see
again
what
in
it was.
Tennessee.
In the Civil War, there were two groups. You know, there's the North and the South.
Uh-huh.
Well, our grandma and granddad and them didn't want to fight against anybody, so Tennessee was a volunteer state. You would go over there and you didn't have to go to. And so that's where they'd gone over there, you know, and she meant to go to him. And she walked all the way from Clear Creek down here across the Smoky Mountains and on to Tennessee, and down through to Loudon.
She'd tell us
And
all
Tellico
kinds of things.
Springs. She'd tell us all about that trip. And I never did ask her where she went to and how long she stayed and how she got back.
She stayed several months, though, before they... And her brothers and all met. They was there together, but they never was together anymore. They separated on Black Oak Ridge in Tennessee. But two of her brothers they had them in a stable of a thing, didn't they? They'd caught them, and they scratched out with a fork. They got somebody to give them a fork, and they dug out that night, dug them a hole, and they got out and got away from them.
When you said they, were you talking about the North or the South?
Well,
don't
it was
know. But everybody was mean back then. They'd kill each other. They're good now. I tell you, that's been years ago that Grandma was telling. We was little things, littler than she is, and it's hard to remember.
I think you're doing great. Tell me how you grew up. What did you do all the times in between you weren't going to school and things? Did you work in the fields? Did you help your parents raise your food? And what
Dad would come. He'd work some up here at town, and he'd lay off something for us to do that day, and we wouldn't quit till we got what he had laid out for us to do done. And then we got that done. Mama let us play any way we wanted to. I know one time we had a big old cabbage patch over there, and there was a man that worked at town. He's great tall, and he'd go right through the middle of the cabbage patch, and he took such long steps. That was kind of curiosity to us. So we got over there, and we dug great deep holes every step we thought
between
he'd take.
every row.
And then we covered it over with bark and then put dirt over there.
You wanted him to fall?
We
wanted him to fall.
His name was Madison Hanson, and we meant to get him because he just went right down through our field every day.
Dad got over there, and then that night he went around and climbed over there, and he didn't get in them, and Dad got over there. Fell in them holes.
Oh, boy. I bet you got it then, huh?
No, he didn't whip us.
He didn't whip us for that. He told us not to do that anymore.
Did Lyman try to help you with that, or did you girls do that?
Lyman helped us.
He'd help us do everything. He had a yoke of oxen, and they was awfully mean. And he'd put them to a wagon, and we'd get in it. And way back up the hill, and they'd always start towards the creek. And whenever they'd get to the creek, they wouldn't go out up the ford, they'd take right up the creek with us, right up in the bushes on each side. But that's the way they'd get rid of us, going through that water. But
Did he swap the produce and stuff that he raised for things like coffee and stuff?
yeah, Dad would.
And
I used to go with him to, we called it a peddling. He'd load his wagon up, you know, and I was just a small girl, so I'd go with him to Walhalla to sell his. He'd take apples, chestnuts, and cabbage and potatoes, and Mom would fix up her each, you know. We'd stop and build up a little fire and heat things and maybe fry some bacon and eggs. And I thought that was the best eating.
Well, these
And
hills,
we'd spend the night in Walhalla, and I was down there with him one time, and we were right next to the railroad track. Well, I was in the wagon holding the team for him, and they heard that train a-coming, and they ran away. Now, and I mean, when horses get scared, it's just too bad. So there they started, right up through Walhalla, and the colored man finally got to them and got hold of the reins and stopped them. I don't know where we'd go. But I always had nothing against the colored man, for he'd really saved
Did
saved
you have
my
potatoes
life.
and cabbage and everything flying every which
Well,
way?
no, there wasn't anything flying out. I guess Dad had sold out. I don't know. He just left me there to hold them. He never thought about them running off. And
Yeah.
they got scared and away they went.
these hills used to be covered up in chestnuts.
Wild chestnut?
Yeah.
Yes, you get out and just pick up a peck in a little while.
And how much money would you get for a peck of chestnut?
I don't remember about that.
How much did like a pound of coffee cost then?
I guess about a quarter. I don't remember.
And I
We're
sold,
talking about 1920s.
I sold a lot of coffee right down there at 35
No, that
cents
was
a
before
pound.
the 20s, because I was born in 1905, and I wasn't, I
35
wasn't
cents
anything
a
like as
pound.
big as
what
these
we-
girls.
That 1910, 12, 15, somewhere in there?
Me,
No, I said that's about what year it was. Isn't that about 1910 or somewhere in there?
I guess it was in 1912, long now, yeah. But he'd bring in maybe 50 pounds of sugar and
Do you remember?
50-pound
What do you
bag.
think about the first car that you ever saw?
Oh,
And Charlie Brooks was one of about the first and to own one in this country.
And what
old
kind
man
was it?
John Smith had a truck,
The tractor.
and we'd hear him a-coming up the Walhalla Road, you know. We'd be down in the field there working, and we'd hear him a-coming. We'd throw our hose down and run up to the road to see him go by, 'cause we weren't used to anything
And it
like
went
that.
slow. It'd take a long time.
Was that a model or something like that?
Matt said it was a tractor. I
Yeah,
thought it was a
kind of-
truck.
No, it was a kind of a tractor road out thing. And I could walk faster than it'd go. Dad he always kept him a big fine horse that he just rode, didn't work. And he could get on, he had one he called Dixie, and it was so black it just shined. And he outrun a car to Highlands from down that Clerk Creek. They didn't travel fast like they travel now. And he'd get on that horse, and it was so pretty. And he was good looking too. He was this fly.
I don't know how we ever made it. You know, I fell off of a load of hay across in the creek one day. Lyman is driving the team, and they'd have that wagon, you know, just way up high in the pole across the
And
top.
we was all
And I
alone.
slid off into the creek. And then one day,
It scared me.
one
to
day
death
I
when she
was
fell
coming
off.
down the hill from the barn and I fell off and the wagon ran over me.
Well,
But
one
it
of
was empty then. But
the
I
dangerous thing you ever got into, we had, I don't know what you call them, we'd put a stake in the ground, and then we'd make a hole in it, and then we'd get a great long
There was a
Tree.
merry-go-round.
tree and put on it, or small sapling, and then, we'd just go around. You could just fly with it, put a steel pin in it.
Well, they
And then
have them in the schoolyards now.
And she went off, the piece that was nailed on the end come loose, and she went off, and I guess she went 30 feet and hit in a wagon wheel, but it didn't hurt her.
You must have landed on her head.
That's the reason I don't know anything now.
Okay, my sir.
Okay.
Well, we'd grow our own cane, and we'd have to pull all that fodder off. We didn't make it with the fodder on like they do now, and it'll be black, When we got it made, it'll be clear and just amber color. So we'd have to strip the cane, cut off the heads, and then we'd have the cane mill or something like that. The merry-go-round Mett is talking about. Have you ever seen one? Yeah, you've seen one. Well, they'd hitch the mule to the syrup mill, to the cane mill, and we had to drive the old mule around because he sure wouldn't go all the time by himself. And one would feed the mill and one would drive. And we'd get the juice, and then Dad would have the cane mill, so he'd make a furnace. Have you ever seen a cane mill where they made syrup?
Uh-huh.
And they had that big long boiler. It was about how long was it? About 6 feet long. Anyway, it was cut into sections. I've forgotten how many. I guess there's about 4 of them. And they had a big barrel up there that they put that juice that they ground out. And it would run into that big boiler. And the one up, when it would begin to get ready for syrup to take off, it would have the best skimmings on it you've ever seen. We'd get us a cane stick and make us a kind of a brush, and then we'd dip. We loved that skimming off of that. After it got right ready to take off, it was delicious. But they'd have a hole that they'd put those skimmings that they'd skim off in.
I fell in that
And
hole
it's about
one time.
knee deep in one night where we were around it. I stepped in it.
Yeah, and I
No.
did too.
But that was really fun to see that.
That was the most enjoyable thing about we'd do.
We'd usually have a candy pulling then after it was
Yeah.
over with.
We'd gather somewhere and
You ever made
make
syrup
candy.
candy and
Never
pull it?
made any syrup candy. I've never seen it made. Tell me how you did that.
Well, you boil it till it gets the right thickness, and then you butter your hands, and get them and pull it when it gets cool
Is that what
enough.
they call taffy pulling?
That's when we'd have
That's
candy.
right.
For you get your partner and you go to pulling candy.
Let's have one of them.
And you'd pull and pull till it'd get right creamy colored, and
Yeah, it's so pretty.
you'd put it on a dish, and then you could whack
Plat
it up.
and let's do anything with it. Just plat it up.
How did you preserve that candy so it'd stay? I mean, when you fix to pull it in that like that,
Well, the more you pulled it,
The harder it got.
yeah, it'd
and how long would it keep?
We
keep
did
right.
it. I don't know how long it took.
Long as it lasted.
right on it, did
Can you think of a story where you were together and did something that was like riding those sheep or the cow one, and then maybe Aunt Mett can tell hers, and then you can tell what you remember of it.
I don't know whether there'd be any difference in it or not.
I guess it'd be about the same because it seemed like we both remember about the same, about everything.
Yeah, I don't know if I got a whole lot of that story about riding the sheep. Why don't you just go into more detail about how that got started and why you decided to do it, and a little more of the details of actually riding the sheep in there.
And the one that you trained and buddied all those fellas, where did he get you, Daddy? At the backside?
Yeah. Right in the back.
He'd bend over and send him wham, huh? Just tell that again about the sheep, how you rode it and why you rode it. It's just a fun thing to do whenever you started.
It was just a plain thing. It was just the way we spent our time. I know one thing we'd do. We'd go up on the hill and we'd take little saplings like that one up there and we'd bend it over and we'd go out of, we wouldn't ever hit the ground. We'd just go from one sapling to the other and we'd just go right on and those saplings, we rode them till they
He's playing Tarzan, was he?
Down there at school, that's
and
where we did that.
and then we had this one place up the branch where that little spring was up there. We just,
I don't remember
no,
that.
I guess you was too young, but me and Lyman, we had us this long ways, and them saplings, we rode them so much they just turned the way we rode them, you know.
Climb up the top of pine trees and sail down from limb to limb and then escape on to another and go on to that?
They were small like saplings up there, and you'd climb a sapling so far and it'll bend over.
And then
you
into
go
the-
out and put into another sapling.
Yeah, you sort of pitch
You'd
you over to
see
the other
how
one
far
and you
you
go from there.
you'd see how far you go and never touch the ground.
And never touched.
They used to play that down there at school at Clare Creek. Those trees, when we grew up and I guess married, you could still see those trees bending over where they did.
Yeah, I don't guess
Where the
they
boys
ever got
could ride
straight.
them, you know. I don't know of anything else to tell.
What was the name of the sheep that used to bite your dad?
The name on
What kind of sheep was it?
there's white sheep with a little black on
Well,
there.
she wants to know his name. I don't remember.
we-
What did we name him? Just the buck, I guess. He's just a buck sheep.
You can really pet a sheep.
You had a pen up
They
on the
wasn't-
hill and you put the sheep in the pen? Is that what you had?
Yeah.
We
long
put them in the
stable.
stable of the
Dad
night.
had a side stable and it's covered one way by the side of his barn. It was this long, you know.
And you get on top of those and
We'd get in the pen with the sheep and just jump on one.
then it you
Around.
start jumping around. It makes you
and they
fall off or
start going
something?
around and
It'd
around.
go right through the butt. Every time they'd get right in the biggest bunch with you, and sometimes they'd drag you off or throw you off, but
You never did get hurt.
it wouldn't hurt you because the others is so soft to fall on. But now when they butted you, it hurt.
Why did you train that into Butchie?
That's awful easy done. I know we had one trained and we hung up a mole. Y'all don't know what a mole is, but
What is it?
they're big at the bottom. You can take an oak and it'll have a great big knot on it. And then it'll be slim here and cut it off about that long. And the big knot will be down here. And we hung up one over there in that sweet apple tree. And that sheep liked to butt it, and it'd swing, and swing. The sheep would back away off out yonder, and it'd come and it'd butt that mole this as hard as it could, and one sheep butted itself to death, the best I remember.
Butted itself to death.
Yeah, they'll just butt right on, a sheep will.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And they will. And
Talking about, you don't know what a mall is. Well, back in those days, everybody had a maul to drive
They'd
this
split
iron wedge
wood.
with, to
Ah.
split the wood.
And we had a cross-cut saw. You know what a cross-cut saw is. And that we didn't have these chainsaws.
You ever saw?
Yes, sir. We decided one time, we told Dad we was going to cut wood if he'd give us so much cord for it. And we was going to, and we got up there next to Lyman's and we cut one day. And I think we got a cord or so.
No, we never.
Almost a cord. But anyhow,
We
that
quit.
we didn't
Felt
never
like
make any
three-cord,
money.
didn't
We never
We
did get a
gave it
cord.
up.
We gave it up.
But we had awful big ideas.
What kind of things did your husbands do to earn a living?
Well, Charlie, he drove a school bus a long time, and then we had the bowling alley, and he was a good carpenter, you know, and he built our building chair, and we had the biggest gang from up north that came. Harry Hall, he's one of these Halls, up Tudor's brother, and he was the center of the crowd. They'd come every so often. They'd just about stay here over summer, and we had a piccolo machine, and that whole bunch, they was wealthy, and some of them, it was one lady I know, she'd just feed the Niccolo all the time. She'd never stop. And then crowd would bowl, and some would dance. And it was an awful good bunch to be with, because, and then we had some slot machines.
Slot machines?
Yeah. We had to buy a license with them. It was odd. They'd sell us license, but still, it was against the law in a way. When about once a year, the law would come around, but somebody was always good enough friends to us to tell us, and we'd hide the slot machines till that was over, and then we'd bring them back out. We had a horse racing one, and then we had a dime one, and we had about 4 or 5, and a cigarette machine, and then one of these tables, I forget what that, play ball. It wasn't exactly a pool table. They're little, about that long and about that wide. Ping pong, I believe it is. But you put money in them to play them, but it was odd. They'd sell us the license to do that, and then they'd come around once a year and catch us if it could. But we was lucky enough that somebody had always inform us and tell us.
When did these little girls go to lunch? They'll miss their lunch.
We're supposed to be back at 12.
You ought to stand there ringing that little bell. It was just about like that.
I used the same little bell, and I gave it to Wilma. She has it now.
Well, I've wondered about the little
That's
bell.
where
I'm
it
glad
is.
You
she's
used it
got
all through school?
I used it all the time I taught out in the country school till I got up here, and then I had to.
Old buzzer.
I didn't need it. You asked what her husband did. Mine stayed on Raven Ball.
He was
Farm
a
in the
school teacher,
summertime.
though. He taught school a while.
And we just farm a little and raise a few cabbage and beans in the summertime. He'd stay up there in the wintertime. Look out on Raven Ball.
For the Forest Service?
Mm-hmm.
Charlie used to, when we first married, he run a taxi, and then he had a truck, and he'd haul the groceries in. They had to go to Anderson then to get the groceries, and he'd haul them. And when George Victory got burned up, he was an airplane pilot, and his father, Merritt, they had a store up here in town, the Merritt store. You've heard of it, I know. He'd do their hauling. And when George Victory got burned up, Charlie had to go to Westminster on a truck